Hey, good morning, folks. It's Pastor Stephen here with another No Frills Daily Devotional. And today we're going to be talking about justice and righteousness. Now, it's almost kind of in this sort of situation that we're in as a country. That word justice almost seems like a buzzword where if you say it, you have no idea what's going to get kicked off because of it, right? And so I want to take you into scripture today and talk to you about how justice isn't justice unless it's paired with righteousness, but how righteousness also isn't righteousness unless it's paired with justice. And so yesterday I had a conversation in my video with you about knowledge and fear, right? How as you increase in knowledge of God, your fear level of God also has to increase. And so to get more information on that, I encourage you to check that video out. But what that's called, when you have increasing quantities, things that increase together, that's called a direct relationship, okay? And so, for instance, right, if rainfall increases, the water level in the ground increases, right? That's a direct relationship, okay? And so what I see in Scripture is there's a direct relationship between justice and righteousness, where as justice increases, righteousness needs to increase. But if you don't have both of them increasing together, it doesn't work. Okay, like that old song goes, you can't have one without the other. Okay, and so I want to show you this in Scripture. And so I'm going to take you back to the same passage I read in my previous video. This is back to Isaiah chapter 11. And I'm actually going to continue in the tail end of verse 3 and read into the beginning of verse 4. Okay, and it's talking about Jesus right here in the Old Testament. Isaiah is talking about Jesus, and he says this about him. He says, he will not judge by what he sees with his eyes or decide by what he hears with his ears. But, key word here, with righteousness, he will judge the needy, and with justice, also key word, he will give decisions for the poor of the earth. And it's not just here in this passage that you're going to see a direct relationship or a correlation between justice and righteousness. You're going to see that, honestly, all through the book of Isaiah, but also throughout Scripture, okay? And why is it important, right, that these two things have a direct relationship, right? Why is it that justice and righteousness need to coexist in order for it to be healthy? Well, because if you just have justice, right? If you just have justice without righteousness, right? Like that's what's going on in our world today. We got people demanding justice. But I would argue that in their passion and their pursuit of justice, they're forsaking righteousness. And when you do that, you don't end up with true justice. What you end up with instead is you end up with revenge. You end up with revolt. You end up repeating history. Like, look what the Russian Revolution did for the country of Russia, right? Look what the Cuban Revolution did for Cuba. Not good things, okay? And so justice without righteousness just gives you revenge and revolt, which are not good things. But on the flip side, okay, if you're just pursuing righteousness, okay, and track with me for a little bit because this might bother you a little bit, but if you just passionately pursue righteousness without justice at the same time, you end up with judgment, okay, and a judgmental attitude. You end up with an abuse or an exploitation of the needy. And so you've got, in order to have true righteousness, justice has to be paired with it. In order to have true justice, righteousness has to be paired with it. And I'm actually going to show you this in Matthew chapter 5. Jesus is preaching a famous sermon called the Sermon on the Mount. And it's one of his most famous teachings, right? And so he's surrounded by a lot of people that are poor and needy, okay, in the foreground as he's teaching. Okay, he's surrounded by all these poor, needy folks. okay, who need, they're under the oppression of the Roman authorities, but they're also under the oppression of the Jewish authorities, okay? And so you've got this people that are under this big oppression, and so he's teaching a message on justice, okay? He's teaching a message on justice. He's talking about how we're to give to the needy, how we're to care for the poor. Like that's the Sermon on the Mount, but it doesn't stop there, right? Because in the background of the conversation is all these Pharisees, okay? And so Jesus says this. He says, this is Matthew chapter 5, verse 20. So in the middle of a conversation about justice, he says this, "For I tell you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees," sorry, my alarm's going off there. "Unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven." And so here Jesus is. He's in this tense situation. He's got all these poor, oppressed, needy people surrounding him. And he's teaching this message of justice. But behind them is this crowd of Pharisees gathered. And so on one hand, the Pharisees are frustrated about Jesus' message of justice. But then he turns around and gives a message about righteousness, which had to have bothered the oppressed people in the front. And what is Jesus trying to do here? Is he trying to stir up a big fight? No. He's trying to get people to realize that in order to get true righteousness, you have to have justice. But in order to get true justice, you have to pursue righteousness. And I encourage you, okay, in this climate, in this day and age, let's pursue true justice and let's pursue true righteousness. Hey, you guys, I hope you're doing well and have an awesome, awesome day. Be blessed, y'all.